I was walking around the floor of National Religious Broadcasters very early this morning before anybody else was on the floor, and I went by one of the booths and actually sitting there, and this is a terrible thing, I didn't even notice you at first. I noticed your tape first. And I saw the tape and I thought, Bob would just love this tape because Bob just loves your music. So I picked up the tape and I thought, well, I need to ask somebody if I can just rip this off, so I'm not doing anything bad. And there you sat. And so I asked you, and now you're sitting here with me, and I've got Steve and Annie Chapman with me. And actually, you're probably not sitting here so much for the tape as you are your new book, because that's what I really want to talk about. And it's called Married Lovers, Married Friends. Welcome.
Thank you.
For the next hour, I told them this has been a real unique NRB for me. So far, I've talked about a book called For Lovers Only. I've talked about a book called Tough Talk for a Stubborn Spouse. Now I'm talking about a book called Married Lovers, Married Friends. I'm very depressed.
I told you should go take a cold shower.
This is not the way to spend 4 days when you're single and you're on the road a lot, talking about everybody else's happy marriages.
That's
It could get really, it really does get very depressing. But I'm happy for you all. Why another book? We got divorces all over the place. I mean, it's a statistic now. You read the paper, and I think when you're single anyway, half the reason half of us are single is because you're so afraid to get married, because they tell you that what is it, up to almost 70% of all the marriages are going to go through a divorce in your lifetime. So why even go through all the hassle to get married, to be happy for a year or two, to be miserable in 5 years and have to go through a divorce?
We've been happy for 16.
Well, you're unique.
And we've known each other for 26 years.
You're really unusual. And you still like each other.
Yeah, I like him okay.
I'm trying to think of the second verse of Someone for Me. How's it start? Remember? We may end up with, because when I don't have a guitar on, it's hard for me to remember lyrics when I'm not playing.
Well, you can always hum along if you want to,
The lyric says...
some friends already have.
Yeah, some friends already have sad stories to tell, how their love was mistreated, it didn't go too well. And when I hear how they feel, Lord, it makes me afraid. I want to be sure when the choice is made. And that's in a song called Is There Someone for Me?
That's the story of my life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we really believe that you can be married and be lovers and be friends. That, when people are dating, all of the electricity and all the passion and excitement is there. We believe that it doesn't really have to leave when you say I do, that you can cultivate a friendship that will last through the years, and you can also be lovers through those years too.
So the honeymoon is not over?
No.
No.
Say no, honey.
No, it's not. Absolutely not. No way.
Good answer.
Good answer. That's right.
Good
Just the way
answer.
I told him to.
I liked that. Is this how it works?
Yeah. We're good friends, and that's how we started. Annie and I met her in 1964.
You were children, of course.
Yes,
I
in
was
junior
12.
high school.
Yeah.
It was love at first sight for Annie. And in 1974, I finally asked her out for a date. So I moved slow, but sure. 1975, we married. But we started...
You didn't move slow then.
Well, we dated a week and got engaged.
Well...
And got married 4 months later. We had a lot of time to make up for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
those 10 years when you couldn't get engaged when you were 12.
That's right.
Okay.
So,
but the element of friendship, people who really are good friends, their relationship is built on respect. And one of the reasons I stay with this woman is I respect her very deeply. I love her. I think she's beautiful. But the bottom line for me is I respect her. I respect what God has said about the woman. And on that foundation, I can build commitment.
It brings up some interesting questions. I have friends, and of course when you're single, you surround yourself with a lot of single, it just happens. And so what do you talk about a lot? You talk about marriage. That also just happens. And some of the people have talked about, if I had my druthers, I'd rather marry somebody who I'm not in love with, who I'm just a good friend with, because A, if anything happened, it wouldn't hurt as much, but B, it seems to last longer if you don't fall in love when you're madly, or if you don't get married when you fall madly in love, but if you just kind of are buddies. Now, give me a response.
Yeah, we believe that people get married because they love each other, but they stay married because they like each other. And so to cultivate like is very important.
One doesn't necessarily go along with the other?
No, I think there are people who experience passion and lust and need and longing, and there's someone there that's available and interested. And I think sometimes they confuse that for love. I think that's when people fall in love, is when they see someone that they think can meet their needs, and that is a real pit. Because
I have to tell you,
people can't meet your needs.
One of my favorite sayings of all times, and I think I heard Gloria Gaither say it once on a tape, is that you don't fall in love, you fall in a manhole. And I could really appreciate that thought.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about her relationship with Bill, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe you need to ask her about that on a serious basis
No,
sometime.
they're great friends.
Now, we definitely experience the passion and all the good, fun things, and I think that is a glue that really does bond you and is necessary for a marriage. I mean, I just wouldn't want to just have only a friendship. I mean, I like the passion too and all the excitement, but you've got to have something with a little more sustenance than just the tingly feelings, and that's where through the years we've cultivated a lot of ways to like each other, and I respect Steve, and
it's hard. Let me say this: it's hard to love is a gushy kind of thing, and it's hard to rhyme like in songs. You know, you can take love and rhyme turtle dove and
Mike.
stars above.
Oh.
Like, take a hike.
Well,
that's the kind of thing.
that's a good one.
But as we're saying here, the like fosters behavior. When I like someone and admire them, I'll treat them kindly. Think about someone who you admire and you really like. When you're around them, you treat them differently, and that's the way I am around Annie. I like her.
and someone you respect. I mean, this is a good place to think about that, NRB. A lot of the top people that you've gleaned from, you've read their books, you've heard their music, you admire them, you respect them. You treat them differently than you would someone that you really have you care nothing about them, or they have not contributed to your life.
You spend a lot of time singing about family, talking about family, writing about family and relationships. This hasn't happened since day one, has it? I mean, obviously something triggered inside you, or what'd you do, wake up one morning and say, I think we need to focus on this?
We didn't say, okay, what's a hot issue and what will bring in revenue, and sell a lot of tapes. That wasn't the approach at all. You're right. I was in a group years ago called Dogwood, and if anybody listening has ever remembered that group,
Don't admit it.
I know how old they are. But
They're old.
the group at one time was just me and Annie and another fella, and then she became pregnant. We became pregnant. And I gained 40 pounds with that pregnancy, in fact.
I only gained 38.
You're kidding? Really?
Yes.
Seriously.
You seriously
I was eating
gained
for 3.
40 pounds?
Yes.
What was it, empathetic eating?
Pathetic, yes.
Well, see, he'd look at me and he'd say, oh, you look like you feel bad. Let's go get a milkshake.
But here's what happened.
Oh.
It took, when she dropped out of the group, we hired a band to replace her, and she always gloats in the fact it took 5 men to replace her.
But not adequately, of course.
No, of course
And
not.
then, with 7 men on the road, what does that mean? You've got to work
a lot of
20,
dirty clothes.
Yeah. And the motorhome bathroom was awful.
Yeah.
But you've got to work 20, 25 days a month to meet budget. Consequently, I'm gone that much.
Yeah.
And so I started struggling with being gone. And I dropped out of the group, and for the sole purpose to be home more.
Mm-hmm.
And during that struggle of whether or not to drop out, my heart was toward home, and my lyric started showing my feelings about the home. And so when I dropped out, I thought, what are we going to do? I was doing some radio commercials and stuff at the time, but my desire was to work with Annie.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord, I believe, honored my decision to go home with giving us the words about the family. So I said, and Electa never got her back out on the road.
No.
So the first time we sang,
This wasn't your heart's desire?
I wanted to stay home with my kids. And I didn't see how I could do it and be on the road.
the first night we sang a song called Daddy Please Find a Reason, which is a song about a little boy begging. In that church was significant. And so we started thinking, maybe this is the direction the Lord wants us to go. And we did it really out of a need that we saw. more than anything else.
You bring up the fact that you saw the response in a church. Were you surprised? I mean, you can't be
Yes.
anymore today, but it must have been a real shock for you then.
It was.
Because the church is supposed to be perfect, and families are supposed to be all together, and mom loves dad, and dad loves mom, and we all love the kids, and happy.
Yeah, a woman came up holding a Bible and said, that just happened to us just this week. And, I said, well, did it offend you, the story we sang? She said, oh, no, please tell others how I feel. But right there in the confines and the safety of those walls was people who hurt probably the most, because they have in their mind what the ideal is, and they're not attaining it.
Is that a real problem? Let me ask you this. Is that a real problem with the church and how the church is set up? There really is kind of an ideal still when it comes to marriage. Actually, there almost is an ideal church unit. It is still tough for singles in a church.
Yeah.
It is still tough if you're divorced in a church. Ideally, if you're going to go to a church, you'd be better off if you were a couple. It'd be really nice if you at least had one child, were pregnant, or had the 2.5 kind of a thing. And that works well because they've got outlets for the entire family. It is not easy, even in 1991, to be different and to not be a family unit in a church today.
I remember going to church when Steve was with Dogwood and taking the kids with me, and it's me dragging the little kids with me, and going home after church was one of the loneliest times of the week for me.
I bet.
To walk away without Steve, knowing I was going home with the kids, and we'd open up a can of tomato soup and eat crackers, and why even cook, because it's like we didn't have a family unit. But I know what you mean. I don't think it's wrong for us to strive for the ideal.
Right.
The marriage is supposed to be the picture of Christ and the bride, and God has given us some real straightforward ideas about how a husband should treat a wife, and how he should love her and cherish her, and the wife should respect and honor the husband. So those things are necessary. I think one of the reasons why families are so under attack is because Satan is jealous of this picture of Christ and the bride. He hates it. And so there is the onslaught. But I know what you're saying about the single person and the single again. Now, we do a song in our concert called Still a Family. And we recognize at that time that Steve and I are the typical family, the mom and dad, the little boy and little girl, and the station. We have a station wagon.
Do you have a station
Isn't
wagon?
this boring?
Oh.
And we don't have a dog.
That's almost too good to be true.
Our dog died,
Oh,
so
I'm
we have
sorry.
tragedy in our life.
Oh.
But
You need another one,
I know.
obviously, quickly.
But so we are a typical family, historically thinking such. But we also recognize that the Bible recognizes other configurations of the family, like Lazarus and Mary and Martha, a brother and two sisters living together as a family. And if history serves us correctly, we're told that Joseph died shortly after Jesus was in the temple when he was 12. At least he doesn't appear in the scriptures anymore. And so if that being the fact, then Jesus was raised the majority of his life in a single-parent family.
If this is so true, why is it so hard to get the rest of the church and the rest of the body of Christ to accept that? I mean, you guys have traveled, you've written books. I mean, you have to run into this a lot.
We do. I think maybe Steve believes that I should let him say this, but the loneliest segment of our society is the divorced man who no longer has access to his children. You get one of those after a concert, and you can just cry yourself silly because they're so lonely. And, they're paying a lot of them don't, but we talk to guys who pay their child support, and yet they don't have their kids. They go home alone, and it's sad. And the church has got to address these segments of the society and of the church that are being kind of shoved under the rug because we don't know what to do. But in our song, Still a Family, it very basically says, you are still a family. Though one of us it's speaking from a first person.
Right.
Though one of us is gone, we can still carry on because we're still a family. And in the song it says that Jesus knows our hurt, and he spoke to me and he says it's not over, that he can take the pieces that remain and he can make this whole again, and you can be a family. And so people need to be encouraged in that situation.
One thing that I do see, there is a growing number of ministries in a lot of churches, especially churches that have larger staffs that are able to emphasize this, but there's a growing number of ministries toward those people who are hurting in that way, and unfortunately not enough, and not quickly enough.
It does seem like the church is striving, at least to catch up.
But, the pastors and many of the people have their ideas, and they just don't know where to put. The single mom just doesn't have a slot.
Right.
It's not easy to minister to her.
Well, I think, it's got to be tough on the kids. Because we're different. There's something different about us. We go home and we have only one adult person, and I was raised in a single parent family, and I remember the most horrendous day every year of my life was the father-daughter picnic. I would plan, you plan illnesses, and a kid should do this because this is the kid's mind. And here's this day limit, and it's Thursday night. So on Wednesday, your throat's scratchy. It's starting. You can tell it's coming on. By Wednesday, you have a full-fledged case of yuck. And half of it's probably mental, but you work yourself up into it.
But I think what we need to be careful is I read this in one of Chuck Colson's books. He said it's easier to redefine the family than to reconstruct the family. And God does want kids to have a mom and dad. That is plan A. People make decisions, and it's just like in the war. There's always innocent victims.
Right.
And when parents and adults make choices, kids suffer. I remember taking my 15-year-old niece in my arms and just tugging her as her parents were going through a divorce, and I said, parents can really mess up a good kid, can't they? And she said, they sure can. She had more maturity at that moment than her parents were exhibiting, and it's hard. It's hard. Divorced women will come up and talk to me and say, why am I having these problems? And what you want to say is, because you're not supposed to exist. The reason why there's no pat answers to the broken family is because you're not supposed to be here.
This was not God's idea.
No, this from the beginning, there wasn't supposed to be divorce, but because of the hardness of men's hearts, God allowed a writ of divorcement. And so, you don't want to look at that person and say, you're not supposed to be here, but the fact is, plan A is not that you be divorced. Plan A is that mom and dad, husband and wife, yield themselves to God and say, change me. Change these rough places in my life. I yield myself to you. And then God, working in our hearts, creates an atmosphere where you can raise healthy kids. That's plan A.
Okay, let's talk about married lovers, married friends. You used the L word on the cover of your book, guys.
Yeah.
For the longest time, churches, you don't talk about that. Come on.
Well,
We don't, and heaven forbid, I bet somewhere in that book, there's the S word.
Well, we don't talk about that very much.
You don't talk about that very much. You figured you put lovers on the cover. You didn't want to take it too far.
Just tone this down a little bit.
That's right.
No, go ahead and speak to that. And I want to.
I like that. Go ahead, Steve. You speak to that.
You do.
Well,
No. This is
the married lovers. Boy, oh boy. It's getting warm in here, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have a song that I think I'll just quote the lyrics. Let me read this to you.
Okay.
And this is how we think that marriage should be.
Okay.
Because there are, this is not the lyric, but too many of us are conditioned to believe that passion is only exciting when it's stolen outside of the bonds of marriage. A single person, for example, will get involved physically before the marriage, and there's just something that happens when the waters are stolen. They seem sweeter. But Satan, that's a deception. God has a design for the sexual union to be known only in the bonds of marriage. And he has reasons. There's safety reasons.
Especially today, yes.
Yeah, there's very practical reasons why he wants that. But for those who feel like that sex within the marriage is boring, there are some extenuating circumstances why people believe that, but let me read this lyric. Her heart was pounding when he called her on the phone. They made their secret plans to spend the night alone. She feels his passions. He feels her dreams. I know what you might be thinking, but this ain't what it seems. 'Cause they're married lovers. They have a right to this romance. Married lovers don't have to worry when they dance. Married lovers, there's no sin in what they do, 'cause heaven gives its blessings to this holy rendezvous. Second verse. Ain't nobody being cheated, nobody cries. And when they see each other, nobody's telling lies. She feels his passions, he feels her dreams. Its love is pure as silver inside the golden ring. That's where it's designed to be enjoyed.
Okay. Realizing that I come from a very jaded generation, and I do. My mind says, my heart says, that sounds good. That really does, and I think it sounds lovely. My brain is sitting here saying,
Or hormones.
or sitting here saying, oh, come on. I mean, I live in the real world here. I know what it's like out there. I'm happy for you guys. Y'all are happy. You've been married forever and ever. You got great kids. But if you weren't married right now, if you were single, if you were out there, or even if you were one of those married couples out there who look at each other every morning and just go, oh, spare me. That's reality today. I mean, that's 1991.
That's
it's
also
sad, but it's true.
That's also a mentality outside of the safety of God's standards.
I remember when we did a concert up in New Jersey, and my brother-in-law came to the concert. He's a narcotics agent with the DEA, and he was sitting there with his wife, my sister. My sister relayed this story to me, and he looked around the room, and he said, "These people know nothing of life. They don't know the reality of what's really going on in the world." And we did the concert and all this, but he made this comment beforehand. We did another concert, and he came again, and he was sitting there, and she said, this time he said, "You know what? The people I work with are the people who are unreal. This is the real world, where people are supposed to love each other, be kind to one another, love their children. This is reality. What I deal with on an everyday basis as an ARC is not reality."
How has reality become the minority then?
It's the perspective that you look at. Now, when you say about the real world, look, I don't have to worry about getting diseases. I mean, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Because we are only for each other. And there's safety. You don't have to worry about some psycho taking advantage of you. I believe that God restricted sex for marriage not as a restriction, but to protect it. And it's the protective bonds of marriage, not the tight, the straitjacket of marriage. But it's something that's so wonderful, and the relationship is so tender that it needs boundaries and it needs protection. And that's, to me, this is reality. Married lovers, married friends is more reality than all of the other stuff that you see on TV of people going to bed with each other. They don't even say, "What's your last name?" It just makes me sick. And a lot of these, like some of these movies are.
Well, it's become a part of a date. We were sitting around talking one night over coffee, and I have a younger cousin who is at that age now. She's in high school and getting ready to go into, or actually no, I guess she's in her first year of college. And she was talking over Christmas because she came and it was like, this is serious, Bonnie, I really need to talk to you. And her biggest problem is, nowadays a date is, let's go have dinner, let's do a movie, let's go to bed. And it's no big deal. I mean, this is their mindset. Some man thought this up. Oh, yes. I'll believe that.
This is not a woman's idea of a date. This is a man's idea.
I might even agree that, but it's so sad.
Absolutely.
And you got these 20-year-old kids, 19, 18, well, nowadays you got 14 and 15-year-olds, who are we kidding? Who, for them, life, or a Friday night ends with, excuse me for making it crude, but a roll in the hay. And that's what it is to them. And that's really all it is to them.
And those people carry a lot of emotional scars, because when you give yourself away, it's like taking a piece of tape and it has stickum, it has adhesive. And when you bond to something, and then you rip that tape off, it still has bonding and stickum to it, but it has less than it originally had. And when you bond yourself time after time to people, you lose your stickum, you lose your staying power there, and you've messed yourself up really bad emotionally. And let me tell you what I used to do when I was dating. Believe it or not, Steve's the only guy I've ever kissed. We got married when I was 23 years old.
You look so honest that I do believe you.
I'm telling the truth.
Well, my hair was brown up to the day I kissed her. It was such
Sweetie, this isn't TV. I mean, man's
it was such an incredible experience. I suddenly
too much for you?
Yeah, looked like Moses after.
We kissed the day that we got engaged. I wouldn't even kiss him before we were engaged. But I had dedicated myself to the Lord, and I was willing to suffer. And believe me, there were times when I would come in from going out with someone that I really liked, and I would just be angry with the Lord because I felt like he had called me to a walk that was more difficult and more straight, more structured, or I don't know the word. Then, because my friends were not doing this. They were not living this kind of a life where they wouldn't even kiss someone. But I felt like God had called me to really a pure walk before the Lord, and that until I married, that this was going to be the person. That I wouldn't even kiss anyone. I know this is archaic.
I would love to read your diary from that period of time. It must have some fascinating pages in it.
It was excruciating.
I bet it was.
It was. I would come home and just cry.
Yeah.
Because it's like everyone else can play kissy face and huggy bear, and God has called me. It's like I felt denied and all this, but I also felt very strongly that God wanted me to do this. Well, consequently, I had to really be careful about who I dated. And when a guy would ask me out, I would say, I am so honored that you would ask. I need to tell you something beforehand. And I would just say, I just want you to know that I don't do nothing. I mean nothing. Now, if you would still like for me to go out with you and enjoy my company, I would just be honored to. But if you don't, I will not think badly of you, and I won't have any feelings, that are negative towards you. I understand. But I don't give receipts for hamburgers. And so, as a rule, I had very good relationships with the people that I dated because they knew they were going out with me to be with me, and they were getting nothing in return for that. And so when I didn't know God was going to put us in a public ministry talking about all these things. And when we go and sing, just not long ago, a friend of mine that I'd spent a lot of time with was at a concert. I could look him straight in the face. I had no reservations. I didn't have to wonder, what's he thinking about what I'm saying? It was wonderful. Wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah.
It must have been great for you when she told you that, too.
It was wonderful.
I bet.
When the adult who are parents these days say, they're going to do it anyway.
And a lot of parents say that.
Yes. And that's the thinking of so many. Doesn't it have a lot to do with which God we're committed to? If we're committed to the God of self, we're going to say, okay, this body, we're going to have to respond to it. So let's pass out these little packages and make sure we're safe about it. But on the other hand, that's the importance of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Him bringing us to the Heavenly Father. Then if we're committed individually to a higher standard, then our whole perspective changes, and our mode of behavior changes because he has some guidelines for us to live by. So if we're committed to self, hey, I understand that rhetoric.
This is the end of Side 1. Please turn the cassette over at this point for the continuation of the message on Side 2.
Do you ever leave concerts? Sometimes I walk away from the microphone after doing the show, and I just want to hide off somewhere because of the phone calls we have gotten. But you have to, you literally face people eye to eye.
Well, we've turned the lights out at churches.
There you go.
We locked the doors.
That bad?
Yes, ma'am.
And you see their tears, and you see their hurts, And I mean, unless you're blind and deaf nowadays, you know what's going on in the world, and I think it's very nice to say it's a mess, literally. We've got society's in a mess. Do you ever walk away and just feel like, no, I mean, you kind of got the world on your shoulders, and you're trying to do this, and you're trying to get this message across, and, I mean, it's just not getting anywhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're seed planters. You know, the Lord has made some promises. Believe and grieve many times.
But we also acknowledge the fact that we are not the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I would love to fix it, I can't.
Every little hurt.
And I tell people when they come to me and want me to give them the answer, I say, you know, if I could fix this, I would. I really would. I'd make everything okay, but I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And we've come to the place where we know all we are earthen vessels, and wanting God to speak through us, but we do not have the answer. We cannot make things right, and only God can do it. And when we pray before we go out, we always pray, Lord, please have mercy on these damaged, hurting people. We can't do anything for them, but you are the one who sees every need in their life, and you can meet their need. It's a big relief to not feel like we have to do it, because we know we can't.
Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself, you wrote this book for the church. I mean, I've flipped through it, and basically this is a book that is written for the church.
Mm-hmm.
It's written for Christians. It's probably written for people who already have an okay marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to make it better. Am I right?
Right.
Pretty much, right.
I mean, we're not starting out here in shreds,
Right.
and picking up the pieces. Why was it necessary?
Well, I think in Proverbs it says that man dies from lack of instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes marriages can die from lack of instruction that we always need. I'm constantly reading. We're reading a book now, Incompatibility, Grounds for a Great Marriage. Well, we're not that incompatible. We are very much alike. And I think God knew we were going to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week together. He'd better make us like each other. We'd kill each other.
Yeah.
And but we're reading this book now, and we're constantly trying to improve on our marriage and learn things and glean from things. We were asked to write this book about 5 years before we wrote it.
Why such a wait?
We said we would not write until we had something of substance. We did not want to do a fan book, autobiography. We wanted to wait until we really felt like we had something to say. And we do. We talk about being servants to one another, which goes contrary to a lot of thinking. We talk about submitting to one another, which is kind of contrary to a lot of ideas of that God's called us to submit to one another. And it's not Steve lording it over me and me kowtowing and all this kind of stuff. But we felt like it was necessary.
And we
to
didn't
write
want to take a clinical approach to offering this information. It's a homespun sort of approach to some principles that have just simply worked for us, and hopefully can pass them on. But you take a man, for example, in the body of Christ. Well, what'd somebody say? You might stand in the garage, but that doesn't make you a car. You know, you might get in the oven, but that doesn't make you a biscuit.
Right.
And you might know all the things, but are you doing stuff? There's a lot of men who sit in our audiences who have the strangest stare on their face, romantically speaking. They look like one of the Dillards on the Andy Griffith. You know what I mean? Those guys that played the banjos and stuff.
Kind of like they think you're speaking in a foreign language and they're not too sure what it is you're trying to say.
Exactly. Or like your mic's off, you know.
Right.
Like, where their mouths are open. And just because they're sitting there in church and surrounded by the good words doesn't mean that they're doing everything right. And so we know that they're there. And that's one of the reasons we wrote the book. There are guys who are what I call in a conscious coma, romantically speaking.
If I tell you that I think that's not like a minority of the men out there, but I think that's a majority, would you be shocked?
No,
Okay.
I'm one of those guys.
I just wanted to make sure about that.
I happen to be one of them, so I know what I'm talking about.
Does the church need to make how-to lessons? I mean, has it gotten so bad out there that we need to learn how to be married before we actually get married?
Oh, yes, good question. We strongly believe in premarital, pre-engagement counseling, yeah.
Well, I think we're coming from damaged situations. it's not, I don't think people get married thinking, I'm going to really make this person miserable for the rest of their life, you know?
I'd hope not.
I don't think we look down in the crib at our little children and say, I'm going to really mess this kid up. I'm going to shortchange this child, and boy, they're going to be so deficient by the time that they grow up that they're not going to know which way to go. I don't think we do that on purpose. I think these things happen because we lack the insight to know that we've got to work at it. And Steve and I we knew from day one, if we were going to have a successful marriage, it would be because we worked at it. Happy families don't happen by accident. Nasty, damaging, dysfunctional families happen from lack of effort, not because they put forth the effort to be that way.
The fact that nowadays, if we don't get a pizza in 30 minutes, we don't pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I don't get my hamburger in 5 minutes, I'm going to get real ticked off. And I've got 54 TV channels I can choose from, and I don't have to move from my couch to change it. I can just sit there and flip all night. What kind of damage have we done? This instant gratification nonsense is going to take us down the tubes, I keep thinking.
Well, that leads to, I think, some of the problems with the premarital sex that's so terribly promoted, actually, in this country, is that you don't have to wait. You're right. You know, our kids, when we watch television, one day we were watching a program, I don't remember what it was, but within 30 minutes, there was a major family crisis, and then a solution. And I pointed out to the kids at the end of the program, I said, do you all realize what happened here? Within 30 minutes, that whole problem was solved. And I said, do you think that's real life? And they said, no. Because they've seen us have to work through days and sometimes weeks with things. And then we were watching another one day, and it ended, and Nathan looked over and said, well, a major family crisis solved in 30 minutes. And I teach him about the microwave. I call it the microwave mentality. I said, Nathan, you can't learn guitar. And I introduced him to a guy named Phil Keggy.
Ooh,
and
he
said,
must really like you now.
Yes, I said, Phil, tell Nathan how long you've worked to get to where you are. You know, and Don Potter, who is an incredible guitarist in Nashville. I introduce him to these people and make sure they tell him, you don't learn this overnight. And that is a real problem, the microwave mentality.
You guys argue in front of your kids? I mean, I don't mean out and out fight, battle, but do they know that you don't always get along all the time 24 hours a day?
Well,
Or do you get along all the time 24 hours a day?
Our past, our backgrounds, our families are different.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, my mom and dad never yelled at one another, and I was home almost 19 years, and they were afraid it was going to be longer, but they never screamed at one another. Now, they whispered intently, but they never yelled. Now, Annie's parents and family are different. Maybe you can...
Well, we're more vocal. So, but because of Steve's upbringing with seeing his dad, he does not raise his voice to me. Now, I'm a very emotional and volatile type person, you know, and so if I even start raising my voice about the weather or about politics, our daughter thinks I'm mad. So we have a very sensitive daughter who could be hurt very easily if she thinks there's, you know, big uproars and stuff. Now, Steve and I do get along real well. We have disagreements, and if anyone is going to raise their voice, it's me, not Steve. But it's hard to yell at someone when they won't yell it back at you. So if I raise my voice and we're in discussion mode,
Right.
Chances of it getting really loud and out of hand are very much minimized because he won't yell back at me. Now, it's not that he clams up and won't talk to me. It's not that kind of clam.
He just
thing.
whispers intently.
Yes.
He just keeps his voice at a regular thing. And when I'm yelling at the kids and everything, he'll go, "Can you hear how you sound?" And it's like,
Oh, you know...
and it just cuts me to the quick because I sound like an absolute fishwife.
You want some real dirt on us?
Oh, yeah, please.
We had a big fight over something that really, I guess, families shouldn't fight over. It's supposed to be a time of joy, but Christmas is one of our biggest struggles.
Yeah.
Used to be anyway. And you're listening to Ed Scrooge and Sister Claus. I mean, we're totally diametrically opposed to what Christmas is supposed to be. And in our 8th year of marriage, we had the biggest blowout we've ever had, and it was over my being a jerk over Christmas.
And
But
he was a real jerk.
I agree, I was. But
But he's reformed.
we didn't talk to each other for, I don't know, 12, 14 hours.
Oh, actually didn't talk to each other.
No.
Drove all the way to West Virginia from Nashville, 7 hours. Not
Quiet
saying a word.
car.
And the kids,
Deathly silent.
so the kids saw that. They saw us work, and they heard me when I looked over when we were 30 minutes from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. 30 minutes from our folks who have never seen us like this, and being motivated with that
Yeah.
possibility. I looked over and I said, Annie, broke the silence. We need to have a conversation about our conflict here. And she said, I'm listening. So I had a conversation about our conflict.
Did you? And did you work it out?
Yeah, it took a few days to work fully through it, but our kids saw that, sure. And
So life in the Chapman family is not perfect.
well, let's go
It
ahead
would
and let
be.
people believe it is.
It would be perfect if I wasn't so imperfect.
If I wasn't a part of it, it would be too.
You know, it's something that we've done this with our own parents. You know, the other day we heard a guy speak, and basically what he said was, if you're a number one jerk, it's just because your parents treated you rotten when you were a kid and didn't buy you a bicycle. Well,
Was he teasing?
That
No.
was a specific.
He was being honest.
yeah, I don't believe that. You know, we accept the fact that our parents were not perfect.
Right.
And we're not perfect. And I've told our kids many a time, I said, look, we've forgiven our parents for being imperfect. You're going to have to forgive us for being imperfect, because someday there's going to be a little red-headed boy have to forgive you for being imperfect. So it does not bother me, it doesn't ruffle my feathers the least bit when people show that they're not perfect.
I think one of my problems, because all of a sudden there are a lot of books out on the Christian book market about marriage. Obviously, because we have a lot of problems with marriages within the church. It's sad but true. Divorce does not happen outside of the confines of your local first fill-in-the-blank church of whatever city. But every once in a while I get concerned, because all of a sudden I worry now, is everybody going to try to be, going for this perfect family syndrome kind of a situation? And there really is no perfect family syndrome. And so that's why I was asking the questions. If we're going to talk about the book, I want to make sure people know that Steve and Annie Chapman are not just perfect people.
Well, married lovers, married friends is not necessarily something that we are. It's something we work at. And we're
You haven't reached the pinnacle yet?
our marriage is working because we're working at our marriage.
Is it tough?
Yeah.
Is it supposed to be tough?
Well, if we both agreed on everything, one of us wouldn't be needed. And yeah, it's tough. But Annie's, again, we're good friends, and it's probably easier for us than for some to work on our marriage.
Why are people surprised that it's tough?
I don't know.
But they really are.
They dedicate years and years to their careers.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to sacrifice. They're willing to work vacation days, holidays, anything to advance themselves in their career. And then we wonder, something as important as a marriage that, you think you can just put it on automatic pilot and it's just going to happen.
But they really think they can.
Yeah.
They think this should be easy. They think they're supposed to get married, and then they have somebody to help them with their problems.
Oh,
and so that way you have less problems.
Well, I think what people do is they have vacuums in their life, and they see someone and they say, that person can meet my needs. That's the person I've been looking for, someone to make me feel significant. And the other person that they're looking at is saying, hey, that person can meet my needs and make me feel significant. You have very needy people coming at things, and they're drawing from a well that is dry. And they go away thirsty and disillusioned. I can't tell you how firmly I believe, we gain our significance because God says you're worthy enough for my son to die for you. And I love you, and I have forgiven you. And the relationship that Steve and I come together in a marriage has got to be first God filling up all the deep canyons in my soul and filling my needs and giving me significance. And from a place of a filled cup, I can come to a marriage and then give. And give to my kids, and give to the ministry, and give to everybody that walks around and wants to sip out of the cup. But unless my cup is filled with God being the one, giving me significant, I tell you, we're all going to be very disappointed. Our expectations are not going to be met, and we're going to feel like that person let me down again. And it's sad. It is sad. You cannot expect another human to fill a void that only God Almighty can fill.
I want to ask, only because I love the title, you can't be married on the backstroke. I understand all the rest of the titles to your other chapters. I mean, I can understand let God handle your finances. I can even understand getting rid of excess baggage. And I'm sure you don't mean the other spouse when you say getting rid of excess baggage. But you can't be married on the backstroke?
Well, if you're a swimmer, you know that when you're doing, at least for me, when I'm swimming, I hate the water anyway, but if I want to take an easy swim, I'll just lay on my back and throw my arms and kick my legs, and it's pretty easy. But when you turn over and face the water, that's when I look like an absolute fool out there, because it's harder. It takes more work. And that's basically the gist of that particular chapter.
So basically you're saying it's not easy and put some effort into it.
Yeah, and I guess if it was real too easy, you know, would we really want to pursue it? You know, I think we're people designed to go after something that's a real challenge. At least men are. And for me, maintaining this family life is a real challenge.
The other chapter that's really interesting is when the going gets tough, the tough stay right where they are.
Yeah, that's about commitment. And
it's not at a real high level in 1991. Do you realize that nowadays you can file for divorce and it's all over with in 3 months? If it's uncontested. I mean, really, 90 days away and it's...
I look in the classifieds. You know, uncontested, and it's just so easy. It's sad.
And there are thousands of them, literally.
And I think if we again, this is if we were committed to God, not self, and understand His views about the marriage, then those ads wouldn't be there. People would take it a lot more seriously than they do. You know, years ago, the word divorce was frowned upon to even speak of it. And unfortunately, it's become a very common word.
What do you say to the wife or to the husband? I guess, I don't know, I'm a female, so maybe I empathize more with the female side of it, or to the husband who comes up to you and says, I'm really miserable. I mean, as God is my witness, I am miserable. I cry every day. I do not love this man or woman. I do not know what's gone wrong, but I know I hate him. I know I can't stand to be around him. I know I don't even want to be in the same house with him. What do I do now? And I don't think that's an unusual set of circumstances in the church today. There are a lot of miserable people out there who are married. I mean, truly miserable people who are married. And they're holding it together for the sake of the kids, for the sake of appearances, for the sake of. They're not necessarily doing anything to get any help. They're just kind of holding it together for the sake of everything.
And some of those people are in the pulpit.
Yes, that's when it gets really scary.
Yeah. I think that is hard because it's you bring in an emotion there, and we think none of us want to be. You know, God is. You know, the big theology now is God wants you to be happy.
Yes.
He wants you to be rich.
Yes.
He wants you to be healthy.
Have everything your heart desires.
He never wants you to suffer.
No.
I mean, suffer is just a word that is an ungodly word.
No, and you don't make movies out of suffering. They don't sell.
No. But the fact is, and this is hard when you make a hypothetical situation because you don't know the variables. Right. But just taking marriage as is, I think what we all need is a good dose of a fear of God. When we make promises to God, I think He takes those promises seriously. And I think we should take those promises seriously. And I would say to that person that's miserable, and we're not talking about being abused. We're not talking about these kind of variables.
We're not talking about somebody being adulterous. We're just
we're saying someone leaves their underwear on the floor and it gets on your nerves. they
We
grit
can't
their
talk,
teeth at night.
We can't communicate.
Yeah.
We just don't like each other anymore, the
Yeah.
basic. He's going one way in life, I'm going another way in life. He doesn't understand me, I don't understand him, and we just don't like each other.
Well, I'd say that person, the answer to your problem is not to get a divorce. You're just adding another problem on. But there are resources for you to work this out. Go back and say, why did I marry this person? You must have liked each other sometime in this marriage, and go back and rekindle. What Steve and I have done, and we did this 16 years ago, and we've not regretted it, is we burnt the ships. We burnt the escape routes. And we said, whatever is ahead, we're in this together, and only death will part us. And I would imagine a lot of couples made promises that were similar to that.
You know, it's interesting because, I think today people go into marriage with that built-in out. And it just triggered me because you said you burned the ships. Today divorce is not a bad word. It's very accepted. Even if it hurts the kids, it's very accepted. And, I think that a lot of people go into marriage thinking, well, if it doesn't work, it's no big deal. I'll just get a divorce, but let's give it a shot. It's kind of like it's become an experiment. Well, let's try it.
Let me read you this little paragraph out of When the Going Gets Tough, the Tough Stay Right Where They Are. It says, commitment. It's what the Spanish explorer Cortez insisted on when he landed in Mexico. When he saw his crew's fear and vacillation about invading this land of the Aztecs, Cortez gathered the men on shore and then set fire to the vessels on which they had come. Now there could be no turning back. They were committed.
I want to quote your lyric. We made this journey. We sailed here together. We made a promise we'd stay here forever. And when we reached the shore, we touched the ground. We kissed the ground. You took my hand and we turned around and we smiled as we watched the flames light up the night. Because the ships are burning. There'll be no turning back for you and me. Help me.
No matter.
And the ships are burning. Anyway, whatever we find here, on this island of pleasure, there'll be some danger. And we might think about returning, but we won't go.
We both know.
We both know that we won't go because that's why the ships are burning.
This journey, we sailed here together. We made a promise we'd stay here forever. And when we reached the shore, we kissed the ground. You took my hand and we turned around and we smiled while we watched the flames light up the night. 'Cause the ships are burning, there'll be no turning back for you and me. Whatever we find here, we've made it clear here is where we'll always be. And on this island there'll be some danger and we might think about returning, but we both know we won't go. That's why I know that's why the ships are burning. Too many lovers are keeping their ships anchored in the bay. One by lonely, one burning. I know that's why the ships are burning.
This is the end of the message. For further information regarding other topics available on cassette and in printed form, write Compassion Connection, Box 36C, Denver, Colorado, 80236.